Good morning. Welcome. So excited to be here today. Thank you all for saying yes to this opportunity to provide some information that has not been captured during the pandemic on the Latinx community. This particular workshop is called Vaccinating the Vulnerable, and it has an emphasis on a perspective from the Latinx community, individuals who have survived through COVID and have something to say. And so I will start just asking you all to introduce yourself briefly and perhaps tell us what your vocation is, and then we will jump into the questions that I've prepared for you after that. And so first on my screen is Ms. Catherine. Ms. Catherine, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good morning. My name is Catherine Feo. I'm the director of Mi Pueblo Hispanic Community Center in the Manitowoc area, the county of Manitowoc. I've been the director since 2015, I believe so. And I'm from Venezuela. That's all.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for agreeing to participate. Next on my screen is Erica Valafuerte. Erica, would you mind?
Hi, everybody. So Erika Villafuerte with Salud First. And what I do is I partner with great organizations such as Prevea and other organizations working in our communities to help access to healthcare, diversity issues, social disparities. And I also help people with Medicare understanding and enrollment and other wellness resources.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. Miguel is on our screen next.
Hello, everybody. My name is Miguel Villafuerte. I am a student at METC. I'm here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I've also worked with the Latino Chamber of Commerce as well as the Latino Entrepreneur Network of Southeastern Wisconsin, both of them. I interned there for about 8 months, and I'm just like to be very active in my Latino community here in Milwaukee.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Olivia, you're next on the screen.
Hello and good morning. My name is Olivia Ramirez, and I'm an insurance broker, and I work with my own company, ODI Agency. I've been in the industry for 21 years, and I pretty much do a lot of helping the community with their insurance coverages, and I'm glad to be here today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then Bernie, you're on my screen next.
Good morning. My name is Bernie Gonzalez. Originally from Mexico. I've been here since 1989. Army veteran. I'm president of SOFIA, which is a social justice organization out of Waukesha County, which is where I live. And I'm also, I also do financial services and work with a lot of small businesses in the community.
Excellent. Wow. I'm excited to see just a panel of individuals from the different walks of life and to agree to participate. And so my name is Renita Robinson, and I'm the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at Prevea Health, and I am the Senior Grant person responsible for the DHS grant on vaccination. And so that's what is funding our time together here. And I'll jump right into our questions. So our intention is to tell a story of the vaccination experiences of the Latinx community in urban, rural areas of Wisconsin during the COVID-19 pandemic. And our hope is to offer information on how to connect differently with and honorably with low vaccinated members of this particular demographic. I hope that we will tell a story of the honorable way to engage the entire Latinx community exactly from where they are. And I would like to start by asking the question, how did you experience the first invitation you had to be vaccinated? What factors contributed to your response and the position that you took about vaccination? And so what was your initial response when everybody starts saying, you got to get vaccinated? I'll start with Bernie down at the end.
Okay. Yeah. So at first, we started hearing about the vaccination, and from what I can remember, and it seems like a long time ago, even though it hasn't been that long, it seemed like there was a lot of information coming at you from different angles, and it was confusing at times because we had information that said I guess all this conspiracies about it, and then there's other information that said yes, it's a good idea. I've actually decided to get vaccinated because of a uncle passing away because of COVID. So I knew it was real, and I know we had to be protected from it. And so I try to, obviously, my family and I, we believed it because we seen it firsthand. So we actually, went forward with it.
That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you. Miss Olivia.
Well, when I heard about the vaccination, I was like scared to get the vaccination because of all the rumors that, there is no FDA approval on the vaccination. And when I was hospitalized due to something else, I didn't have COVID, but I was required to take have a COVID shot due to, because of my condition. But I was really leery on that, and I couldn't force my family to get the COVID shot because they were against it. But I've not had I've had COVID myself, and I've experienced, the symptoms and everything. And I think with having the shot, kept me from getting really ill on it. So that's one of my experiences on it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I just appreciate you kind of bringing to the fore that there was a lot of energy around family systems deciding or saying no. And so there was a little bit of pressure in addition to some folks feeling like they had to be accountable. I heard Miguel, Bernie, that was one of the things you said. So thank you so much for that. Okay, Erica, could you respond?
Yeah, so being in the, I guess, healthcare wellness field, I'll be honest, I had a couple clinics actually come to me and ask if I would take a picture getting the vaccine. And I have friends on both sides, family on both sides that are for or were for the vaccine and against it. And because of the line of work I do, I work with everybody. I did not want to be the poster child of getting the vaccine. So it wasn't whether I'm pro or not. I just didn't want to be the picture. So people took that as, not the best, like, wait a minute, what are you saying by saying no? But I chose to not make a public choice of what I was going to do or not going to do. And some people, didn't appreciate that. And I'm very for trying to understand why people decide to do something and not do something, and try to understand it as best as possible, as long as you're responsible with what your choices afterwards.
Right.
You might be limited to be able to go out now because of that or whatever it is. But I actually heard a lot of the, hesitancy, a lot of the fear, it's new, they rush to approve it. We really don't know. And then you started hearing about some people getting sick from it afterwards, certain ones. So I was just okay with keeping my choices to myself and not being the poster person, if you will.
Right.
And some people didn't appreciate that. And I had to be okay with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Sure. And it's interesting that folks tried to make you make a public declaration. And I think that that's why this particular broadcast is important, because there are honorable ways to be present with people, regardless of whatever decision they have. And I think that there were times when people didn't understand that it wasn't appropriate to try to force them to align with their side. And so that was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Miguel, could you share some?
Yeah, so I at first originally started off I didn't get the vaccine, and I didn't want to for a good 7, 8, 9 months that it was released to the public. And it was mostly due to the fact that we didn't, it came out very soon. It was only like a year or two that they really had time to create the vaccine, and we didn't know the long-term effects of what it could do to us. And we did find out, I think it was the Johnson & Johnson one, that was creating blood clots in some situations. So at first I was very much not against it, and I always respected everyone's decision. And like we've already mentioned, it became very political. People kind of imposed their ideas, when it should have always just been a decision that everyone takes individually, and because it's your own body and you can decide whether you want to or not. But I ended up eventually getting the vaccine because I just felt that after I was able to educate myself more, after we had more information out, that I felt that if I could do it, it would not only prevent me from getting some very serious symptoms in the future, but it could also help to prevent other people from getting it. And I do like to think that the higher vaccination rates have helped a little bit to have COVID kind of not die down because it's still around, but to lessen to the point where I think now we're starting to get a little bit back closer to like how society was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I
Mhm.
think that vaccination rates having gone higher very much helped for that. And I was somebody that I did get COVID. I got COVID about a month or two after I got vaccinated, and I had very little symptoms. I think I just had a cough. So whether that was because of this vaccine or not, I have no idea. But I did end up getting it because I educated myself. But I did see that the biggest problem with what the whole vaccine was just kind of how political and how
Mhm.
two-sided it became and how people imposed their ideas on other people.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, people camped out until it was either you were for it or you were against it, and it should have never developed into that. And that's just the nature of humanity. So thank you so much for that, Miguel. Ms. Catherine, would you mind sharing?
Sure. So, my experience with it was a little different. I suffer from an immune disorder that it took me really long to get approved to get vaccinated because I'm allergic to the flu shot. So, and some of the vaccines have some medication in it that will make me react the same way. So I had to wait for my doctor to give me the green light to which one, number one, I could have got, get at the time. And when. So it took probably 8-9 months for me to do so. I did get COVID before I got vaccinated, and I was really ill because of my immune system disorder. It kind of made it bigger, made it worse. So I almost ended up hospitalized because of that. My parents, both of them got at the same time and almost died in the hospital because of that. But I agree, it turned out really political. I felt that you had to choose either or. I did educated myself and kind of like what COVID was and find out that COVID has been around for many, many, many years. This is not the first round. That's why it's COVID-19, because we had COVID 10, 14, 15, 16, all those kind of things. So, but I wasn't against the vaccine. I was just cautious, just like all of us, because they weren't really clear about how it would affect you and the side effects. It was kind of like, well, get the shot and see how it goes. That's how I felt they treated us. So I didn't like the fact that if you were against it, for whatever reasons, people will be upset at you and they had really strong opinions. And if you were getting the shot, then why are you getting the shot? And there were all these political attachments to it that this should never happen. I don't know. I never understood why people were so against it. We've been being vaccinated against our knowledge since our babies. This is always being around. This is how we do things. To go to daycare, your children need to be vaccinated. To go to school, you need to be fully vaccinated, otherwise you can't go to school. So I didn't understand the whole being angry about being told you need to be vaccinated. We've been doing this since God knows when. So, I don't know. I still don't get it.
Yeah.
But I know it's really political.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point about why there was so much resistance to this, and you have other mandated vaccinations that people don't seem to have a problem with. And, there are a lot of different theories about why this impacted people differently. One of them was, of course, that it hadn't, the vaccination was new and they didn't feel like it had been vetted and properly developed. And the reality is more attention actually had been given to the design of this vaccine than any of the other, than previous vaccines. And I just think that social media is very different now than it has been at other times where there was a huge, like a pandemic level need for vaccination. And then the misinformation that you all have alluded to had an impact on people's resistance and that kind of thing as well. Thank you so much for that. So Sheila Walsh, she was an entertainer many, many years ago, maybe 20 something years ago, and she had mental health issues in her family, and she was a broadcaster, and she was starting to feel like she couldn't just manage life. And so she told a few people, and they told her, you better never say that out loud because it will sink your career. And so she didn't tell anybody. And one day she was on the set and she really just felt like she couldn't manage anymore. She ended up walking off the set, and it changed her life. And it changed her life positively, not because, not negatively. It changed her life, and she has become a best-selling author, and she has shared about mental health issues and those kind of things. But one of the books that she wrote, she said something that was really impactful to me. And she said, sometimes God gives you gifts that when you open them, they make your hands bleed. And I just think that's a beautiful analogy of the hard things that we have to make tough decisions about. And so I have come to say that COVID actually was a gift that made our hands bleed. And so I want to ask you all, with that against the backdrop, what gifts did the pandemic provide you that may not have you may not have received in any other way?
I can start if you don't mind. So besides being more compassionate, we were being more understanding. Like here in the States, everything's go, 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 go. And the pandemic kind of like slow us down. And it was okay to cancel appointments. It was like people were more understanding. If you like your business, if you it's only by appointment, or only these days are we open. So I like how he made us more patient. We firstly, they forced us to be more patient and more kind to one another when it came to those things. It gave us, I feel that it gave us a chance to realize how things can change from one day, literally from one day to another.
Absolutely.
So for me, it gave me the gift of patience and appreciate who's around me.
Yes, excellent. Thank you so much for that. Anyone else feel like they got a gift, a hands bleeding gift nonetheless from the pandemic?
On my end, being in the financial service industries, I think that it showed that things can happen, to people unexpectedly, and we should be prepared. Whether it's life insurance, whether it's a will, whether it's a lot of different things, because you never know. And I know that there are certain people that we're prone to be, more sick, or they had health, more risks because of the COVID. But there was a lot of people that unexpectedly passed away, and it kind of opened the eyes, and people are being more responsible now when it comes to setting those things up and having those things ready for the future, should something happen.
Thank you. Other gifts, other bleeding hands gifts from the pandemic.
Personally, I would add, as a student, that year, which was fall of 2020 to spring of 2021, those 2 semesters, going fully online, I think was very hard for every student. And in my individual case, I was somebody that in high school, I didn't really study much outside of class. I was able to kind of take in information and get good grades without having to study much outside of class. And once I came to college, college is a lot of being able to study and teach yourself a lot of things. And I think that once we went to online, it hurt a lot to not be able to have those skills. So in my certain situation, my grades dropped during that year. And I think that, that gift that made my hands bleed was that year and having to be online, because after that, I kind of had to take a step back and realize that my study habits were really wrong. and that I had to kind of better them 100% in order to, not waste more money or time, with courses or have my GPA get hurt more and more. So since that, with last school year as well as how this one is going so far, my grades have been much better. And 100%, I think that had COVID never come around, I would have gone another 2 or 3 years into, school. And then I would have realized once I'm 2 or 3 years in, that my study habits are wrong when I'm deeper in the hole and I'm spent more money and I maybe have to retake courses because my GPA isn't good enough. So I think in my situation, I think in a lot of situations for students that had to go through that they kind of just taught them how to teach themselves and maybe to take a step back and realize that they were maybe doing something wrong.
Wow, thank you for that. Thank you for that sharing. Erica.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so, I think a little bit has been mentioned, just appreciating the time with family and things like that, that really made us not really notice how much we were taking it for granted. We were in the busy in and out. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I've spent a whole day with my family, because we were kind of forced to, and really appreciating those times. And now that we're starting to get busy again, or we've been for a minute, just remembering I like those times, and I want to make sure I have time set aside at least once a week to do that, because we were so busy and so rushed. And of course, so family is really important to me. But outside of that, so in my work area, it just made me a little bit more passionate to try to serve the communities I work with. And I think a lot of us in the helping field, we felt at first, very restricted. We felt like our hands were tied, like, there's nothing we can do. And, me working with the Medicare population, I was hearing a lot of stories of loneliness and isolation and what do we do? And it made some of us in this field stop waiting for permission, if you will, for the government to do some things. And we kind of took it upon ourselves to start creating opportunities to serve the community as safely as possible. But we couldn't just sit there and wait to see what happens, when people were needing food, people were needing, direction on how to get to the healthcare facilities, how to understand, so many different areas of what was happening in life. We came together and, did as best we could. And I think that brought a lot of communities together after, some of the shock started to die down. And a lot of times we moved even through the fear and with the shock. But a lot of us moved even when we were told not to. So I think that is being seen now. Some of those things are really starting to pay off with what we did at that time.
Excellent. Very great. Thank you so much for kind of expanding on the gifts. And then Miss Olivia.
Well, okay, yes, with with COVID, happening and everything, it was like a shock to me. I was like, okay, this isn't real, but with my work, not being able to do what I had to do at the time, and it put me behind in a lot of things. And with my family, I mean, the kids, my eighth grader, she got with her school and everything, when they couldn't go back to school, and that it was so unfair because she didn't get her to do her New York trip. And after we did all this fundraising and everything, and everybody was put on hold, and and we had to stay home and do it was like being at halt. And thankfully, we have like a little she shed, and we would like set up our little area, so we wouldn't feel like we were trapped. And but it was like a crazy happening, like and not being able to see my family. And I mean, I take care of my father, and not being able to be around him. But I made every attempt to make sure that he was okay. And he was, he was against the COVID vaccine too. So at one time, but he did end up getting the COVID vaccine. And, with all of us together, it was like, it was crazy.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So just a lot of different experiences, some benefits, and then just some challenges that kind of helped us refine who we are and how we wanted to move forward. So now, what is one thing that you all wish the government and or health officials knew more about the Latinx community, about your family, about your situation? What do you wish the government and health officials knew more about?
So I'll just add my thinking is, and I think it's a lot of our communities and cultures, but in the Latino community, we are very about our feelings and emotions, and we're very close. And I think there was a lack of sensitivity for emotional awareness when these mandates, if you will, were being pushed. There was no consideration for cultural beliefs, how to move sensitively to try to educate people. It was just a push without any consideration of each community's needs to understand what was happening.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. And so what would it need to look like to feel like they were sensitive to those things? What would it have needed to look like for you to feel like, wow, they really took our feelings and our emotions into consideration?
In my opinion, I think there could have been more consideration of, how a lot of times we use home remedies to feel better, and, saying this is an addition to some of the things you're already doing, but it was more of a all or nothing, like, who cares what you do at home? You better do this now. I think, because a lot of my clients that I work with said to me, I'm not taking that vaccine. I'm going to do this home remedy. I'm going to, pray. So when you dismiss that side, that's something I grew up with. That's what I believe in. You're almost kind of attacking me personally. I feel like there should have been some inclusion with that. In also just everything else, in my opinion, was not mentioned that could have helped lessen some of the symptoms that COVID had. For example, eating healthy, staying active, emotional stress relief, all of that impacts our immune system. A lot of times I was not seeing that mentioned. It was just vaccine. And so people were kind of on guard, and then they're saying, I'm going to do what I've always done when I get a cold or when I, and I just think if that other side would have been brought in, just saying, we understand this is what you usually do, and that helps a lot. This vaccine or, these restrictions we're doing now is to enhance some of the things you already do. But it was kind of a all or nothing mentality.
Yeah, I really appreciate that kind of reframe and just like suggesting that there is a both and not an either or. And the vaccine, that's why people camped out, because it was either you get it or you don't, and you're good or you're bad. And so offering a both and, you can get the vaccine, well, both and would have been better. That's thank you for that. Other folks, okay, Bernie.
Yeah, well, so I agree with Erica 100% on what she said. Actually, I have the same opinion, and it did feel like people normally, when people are told pretty much, you have to do this, people kind of like, automatically, there's like a defense mechanism. Why are you forcing me? Instead of making it feel more like if it was a choice, and said, okay, this is kind of like if I'm trying to sell something. Like you said, this is the option, this is the good, this is the bad, you decide what you want. And though if it would have been presented that way, I think it would have been taken a lot better than how it was initially. And so a lot more awareness, a little bit more of I would say spending a little bit more on that side versus, just take the vaccine. It would have been a lot more helpful, and I think it would have been better received that way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I feel that what the government didn't do or could have done better at that time. I noticed, at least in my community, it was a lack of accessibility to the information of where to get a vaccine, what time, who, I personally noticed by accident that the website for one of the big hospitals in town, we're talking about a hospital, their website wasn't in different languages where people was able to set up their appointment and what time. And I called the hospital and said, okay, so how the minorities in my community are going to be able to make their appointment to get there or to ask questions or whatever it is that they needed if there's nothing in their language.
Right.
So the answer was, well, we have the automatic translator or whatever the machine calls, and we can help them. But when you call and they translate with you on the phone, they will send you back to the website to make the appointment instead of them making it for you. So I said, this is pointless.
Mm-hmm.
So that's then my nonprofit. I organize people to make sure that they could call us and they will help them make the appointment. But it was no information. Nobody in the minority community, Hmong, the most here in Manitowoc is Hispanic and Hmong. They didn't have no idea. Zero idea. They thought they were charging for vaccines. They didn't know they were free. No idea, none of that. So it's really sad to see that in such a small city than Manitowoc is, and such a big hospital, that wasn't available. So that made me kind of sad. That made me kind of like, well, we really don't care. Here's a vaccine, whatever. That's how I felt it happened.
Right. And I will tell you that the grant that is sponsoring this workshop or this panel it was birthed out of concerns like that. And so then many of the constituents who received the grant supported the translation of materials, and a consciousness was raised that hadn't been there before. So thank you so much for that. Anybody else want to answer the question about what they'd like for the government or the healthcare entities to know more about?
I would just add, I think that the government doesn't realize how hard at times it can be for the Latino community, specifically the immigrant and undocumented community, that how hard it can be for them at times to trust the government for two major reasons. For the undocumented ones, I've had, especially when I work at the Chamber and the Latino Entrepreneur Network, a lot of them believe that if I'm going through the government, if I'm putting my name into something, this can affect my DACA, this can affect, my application for citizenship, I could possibly get deported. So a lot of them, when it says anything about the government, they're very hesitant to go in and put their name there, as well as just the language barrier. And just like Catherine said, a lot of times it wasn't in Spanish, a lot of time, or in Hmong or in different languages. Specifically, I worked with the Latino community, so that was something that I saw. And when it's a lot of times just a quick Google translate. They take whatever they said in English and just Google translate it, and I'm reading it and I'm like, this does not does not add up. And so working with the Chamber and Len, it was a lot of having to kind of translate that for people, because even though it's in Spanish, they don't understand what it's saying because it doesn't add up. We worked with a lot of grants that the government was giving out to small business owners, and it was money that they needed badly, but a lot of them were hesitant to apply to it because of what I said, that maybe they weren't documented and they didn't want to, or because they just didn't understand it. And I think that the biggest way that they could help with that would be helping nonprofits like the Chamber or Len reach the community easier, but as well as just helping to find other communities or organizations, similar to that, where there can be other Latinos that can help translate it. Because I think a lot of, especially that immigrant and undocumented specific part of the community, I think a lot of them are much more trusting when it comes to another Latino. As myself, they just trusted me a lot more because I was a Latino, and they felt that I understood them, as opposed to if it was somebody else of a different culture that learned Spanish. And I know it shouldn't be like that, because they still mean well, but a lot of them were just much more trusting, knowing that you were Latino. And the other thing, the final thing I want to add was, I think that a lot of the government doesn't understand how, especially again, the immigrant and undocumented part of the community, that they're not really that well with computers. Again, a lot of what I did with the Chamber and Len was just helping them do simple things like create an email or how to respond to an email, how to do something like what Kyla said, which was create an appointment for a vaccine or for different things. And so I think that that's something that they definitely didn't, they weren't really sensitive about or didn't really help, because that was very much a lot just, oh, let's go here. But then they would say, I don't know how to go or do that, you know?
Wow, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay, let me just go to the next question here. All right. So we already talked about the reality that there was a lot of misinformation floating around. How did you get your information when you realized that it was misinformation? How did you then go about getting information that you trusted and that you felt like was reliable? Let's start with Olivia.
Well, my information I got from the news. I watch the news a lot, and I'm not a news person. I did a lot of my research through websites, and just to see what the statistics were as far as the count of people that were affected with COVID and how many deaths, at the time. But it was like, I did a lot of my research that way, and I do have 3 family members that are in the healthcare field that I kept in, we kept in contact, and giving me updates on what I should do, because at that time I was sick myself with bacterial meningitis, and I was at risk for any illness. So I just, with my fear to get COVID at the time, because my immune system was really weak, I had to keep track of everything. So yeah, that was during COVID, I was pretty much sick myself with something, other than COVID. But that's a lot of my research came from the internet. Google.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I'll just say, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Erica. It's fine.
So I'll just say, similar to a lot of people, I would pay attention to social media, but then if something sounded too crazy, I would always double check either CDC or with my own doctor. And then I, went with my gut instinct on, what sounds about right, what sounds, like it's way, far left or far right. And just doing a little bit of research with the official government websites, but also, feeling comfortable to double check with my doctor and trust my own gut.
Erica, a lot of people in the sessions before you all talked about having a doctor that they trusted. What made you trust your doctor or the healthcare system?
I feel like my doctor knows me. She knows I'm all my concerns and issues, and she's very patient with me. So she's very good with explaining things without siding on one side or the other. This is what I think, that I want you to choose your what works best for you, but here's the pros about doing that and here's the cons about doing that. She was never very 100% do it. She would say I recommend it, but I respect if you choose something else. She was never very pushy. She was always about information and letting me choose.
How long, if you don't mind me asking, have you had your current physician?
So sadly, the current one, less than a year. The one I'm talking, she retired. So at that time, I had her for about 15 years, maybe.
Wow. Yeah, that's important. It's important to know that you had an established relationship, and so you trusted her because she had been around for many years. Yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else? Anyone else for that question?
I could just add real quick. In my personal experience, I was somebody that it was a lot of just social media and just talking with friends or family. But it was very important that, like it's already been mentioned, to kind of understand what was very one-sided or politically charged, and it was very important to find information that was neutral and that was just hard facts, and not trying to push an agenda. So um, especially once I got closer to making a decision of if I wanted to get the vaccine, I ended up looking, Googling and actually finding my own research, and I was trying to find a lot of, like I said, not something that was a website or an organization that was historically left or right, and I wanted to find something that was much more just neutral, and as well as just asking people experiences with the vaccine, and mostly people that had gotten it, how maybe they had felt with it and how it maybe impact them before and after. um, but it definitely started off on social media, but once I got closer to making a decision, I took a more active role researching it and finding reputable websites.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else for that one? Okay. All right. So a lot of people talk about accountability. What does the concept of accountability mean for you around the vaccination, and what were you accountable for?
So I can start. Sorry, go ahead, Bernie, if you want.
Okay, Miguel, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So accountability, I think it can very easily be swayed into, well, it's everyone's job to get the vaccine, which I don't like that, because although I do believe the vaccine helped to diminish the COVID problem and the spread of it, I think it's more everyone's job to not only respect everyone's decision, but I think the accountability for everybody was a social distancing, because whether or not you had the vaccine, you could still transmit it to everybody. You could still give it to somebody if you're within 6 feet or if you don't have a mask on. So I think that accountability with COVID for me was making sure that you're cleaning down, public spaces that you had been at, making sure you clean down public spaces before you get there, and wearing your mask, making sure you're socially distanced from everybody. If you were around somebody that had symptoms, let somebody know, or try and distance yourself for a while. And I think that for me, and in my opinion, is accountability when it comes to the whole COVID-19 and the vaccine conversation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then somebody else, Bernie?
Yeah, so pretty much agree with Miguel. To me, it was pretty simple when it came to accountability. Basically, if you chose not to be vaccinated, but there was and then you were a lower risk, people that were a lower risk, but then you would be accountable, and you should have been, or you should be responsible of not getting like with the social distances, or maybe even getting close to people that were at high risk, and just making sure that we took care of each other, one another, and look out for one another as a community. And that was for me the accountability part, looking out for each other and not putting other people at risk if you had the symptoms or if you had been exposed.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Others about this accountability.
I can go. So I think it was really stressful, because you not only had to be accountable and responsible for your own self to keep yourself healthy, whatever that means to you, but it was like embedded in our brains that we had to be really careful. I mean, accountable not just for you, but for the rest of the world. I mean, it wasn't just, this was a pandemic, so we weren't responsible not just for our family members or neighbors or anybody, like anyone and anything. So that for me meant not just keep myself healthy, but also take the steps to make sure other people could be as healthy as I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was really stressful in that aspect. Like, it was a lot we needed to remember. We had 5,000 rules. What to do, what we could do. We had to remember. So our mask, our hand sanitizer, and then wipe everything after we were done. And after that, make sure you don't, you keep symptoms. And if you felt a little flush just because it was warm that day, oh my God, do I have a flu? So it was a state of anxiety of 100 for a long time. So of course that's going to affect our immune system besides the body, and then our mental health and all those things. So I think the word accountable is that it means it's a lot. It means a lot in this aspect because it was a lot we needed to be accountable for. A lot. I feel that that's how I felt. I felt like I needed to make a list of things of, okay, what is it I need to do tomorrow before I leave the house? It was a lot in my experience.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I was trying to find the concept because there was a different offering away from herd immunity, and I can't remember the name of it. It wasn't herd immunity because people felt like we weren't going to achieve actual herd immunity by the original definition, and so there was a different concept or language about what could be possible, and I was trying to find it because I just couldn't remember it. So I apologize for that. Thank you so much for that, Catherine. Did anybody else want to answer the accountability question?
So I'll just add, like everybody else said here, accountability starts individually first. So obviously, whether you choose to get the vaccine or not, maybe you got to wear a mask all the time if you didn't. And even if you did, you can still transmit it. So, social distancing. And even if you have allergies, if you got a little bit of a symptoms, better be safe than sorry and take care of all that. But I also think the rule makers needed to be aware of their own accountability. So I know several people that, for lack of a better way of saying it, lied that they had the vaccine, even when they did not get it, just so they wouldn't have that negative feedback, that pushback against them. So when you're making these rules, you have to take into account what consequences there can be. And then if you say, well, now I want proof because I know there's people that can, lie. So now I want to see that vaccine card. Then you risk, people rebelling and saying you're going against my rights. So there has to be accountabilities too to the rule makers, the decision makers, on what consequences can what we're about to do or ask of people have in the long term or in the short term, aside from just individual accountability, which is obviously very important. But in overhead has to be looked at. What are we doing and what could possibly happen as well?
Wow. Yeah. There's a European philosopher, his name was Antonio Gramsci, and his research talked about how the people that are in the work or in the situation, that they become organic intellectuals about it. And then there's another community, victim services, who basically say that the victim who is living in and experiencing it, regardless of all of what the help and the supportive services are saying, the victim is the expert. So many of us have become experts at COVID for our personal lives. And so I think this idea of accountability really parallels the idea that we know what's best for our family, for ourselves, for our community, and we need to educate the folks that make decisions and create policies about how their policies are going to affect or trickle down to us and affect our day-to-day realities. Wow, thank you all so much for that. Looking at the time, we have about 9 minutes left. And so I want to just reserve this time to let you all share perhaps something that you thought about after one of the other questions and head and share. And then what I'll do is I'll reserve about 3 minutes just at the end to ask you questions about if anyone in your family system died or the long-term effects and that kind of thing. And so is there anything that you all felt like you really wanted to share and you hadn't shared yet?
So I'll just add one thing that comes to mind. Again, you know me probably now by now, Renita, I'm always talking about emotional wellness is key for all our other areas of our life. And one of the things that came to mind is a colleague who's a nurse that shared with me when it was recently requesting the mandate for the vaccine. An older adult was in line to get the vaccine at a hospital system, I believe it was. And she did not want to get it. She was panicked about it because it was too new. She literally had a panic attack in line. They had to calm her down. But instead, and I am not a doctor, so I don't know, the professional protocol that should usually happen with this, but my own personal opinion, I believe she should have been given some information, allowed to go read that. And when you feel more comfortable, or even an hour later or tomorrow, come back. But even as she was panicking, they encouraged her to get the vaccine right then and there without any consideration of how fearful she was. And I just thought that was so insensitive, to not take into account. She's literally, her heart is racing out of her chest. She's freaking out. And they were like, don't worry about it. Get the vaccine anyway. You'll be fine. And nobody really, at that time, nobody really could assure that. It was like within the first few weeks. But she was being also told, kind of what we've talked about, that she was a terrible person if she didn't get it. So she was there doing her duty, but she literally had a panic attack. And instead of letting her calm down, they kind of pushed her through anyway. And I just thought that was really insensitive.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Anyone
Oh,
else?
and it happened also where I was in line, and because of to get my booster, one of the boosters, I believe. I'm sorry, something's on feedback.
If you could mute yourself when you're not talking, that would be helpful.
There you go. I couldn't hear myself. So I was in line, and it was Spanish speaking grandma in front of me, and they were trying to help her with a translated system they have on the phone that is horrible sometimes. Like their Spanish is, God knows what they're saying. So this, instead of, I ended up helping, but instead of finding other way for this older woman to understand what she was getting, because she was kind of like Erica said, a little nervous and kind of like, so I ended up jumping in and helping and translating. But we became cattle. We became like stamp next. Like we lost the sensitivity of like, are you okay? Do you need 5 more minutes? Is anybody I can call so you can calm down, or do you want to reschedule? We became next. And that was so sad how we desensitize ourselves so we can continue going through the pandemic. Because if we don't, it does affect our mental health in a greater way. So I know that was also a mechanism of protecting ourselves, but we need to kind of have some disconnection so I can continue living through this pandemic. Because even though we're talking about it, I notice that people be talking about it like it's over. And it's not, we're still a pandemic. So I don't understand why everybody's like, well, that was, when COVID. No, we're still in a pandemic. I mean, it's not over yet. So, I hate how we became that. We became just, okay, next, without nothing, no connection.
Yep, you bring up a fantastic point, Catherine. Thank you so much for that. Bernie?
Yeah, I just want to add that we also don't talk enough about, for example, here in Wisconsin, between 70 and 80% of the dairy farm workers are immigrants, and how we don't recognize, people that produce food, people that produce our. And so we it's opened the eyes for a lot of us and made us aware of how important are people that work in the fields, people that produce food, people that provide those essential services, how important they are, and how underpaid they are, and how we treat them as a society, and we're not fair most of the time with those workers. So that I wanted to make sure that we add that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Other thoughts, other contributions?
I just wanted to quickly add, like I said, I was a student during that kind of year where everything was focused to online, and especially that year of fall 2020 semester and spring 2021, because the first semester that was like half and half. I think that most teachers and student or schools were very forgiving and understanding the switch. I think that year that was fully online, when the expectations were kind of, we expect you to learn at the same rate as when you were in person and you had a teacher in person. We expect you to learn at the same rate and to take the same amount of tests. but you're learning over a computer, which I think for a large portion of the population is very, very hard to do that. I think a lot of students suffered from a lot of different mental problems. I know I did myself. I suffered from maybe anxiety. I had a lot more anxiety that I normally did in school, as well as and I think I have a couple of friends and peers of mine that I know that they suffered from a lot of other mental problems, mental health problems, because it was just the expectations were the same, but we were learning over a computer now, which I think is so much harder for a lot of people to do. And, especially in college when so many people have just so much pressure on them already, I think it was very hard for a lot of students.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that contribution. And so I just want to recap what you guys have really answered one of the specific questions about the toll that COVID had taken on us mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically. And I think that it's important for us to have government and hospital officials to think ahead of all of those things and try to put some things in place to mediate that thing that's going to happen and then is exacerbated when you have folks that are already marginalized and have other strain. That's just the whole intersectionality of stuff, that there's all this stuff happening, and then you add on to it all of the strain of COVID. You have to be paying attention to that when you're trying to care well for different people groups, because that is a part of being culturally responsive. I want to just take a couple more minutes. We're right at 8:59, and I think we got started about a minute later, but I want to take a couple minutes to see if you all might share any of your family that died, or any people that have long COVID issues that they are working through right now. Just some of the things that remain. People do think that COVID is over. It's not. I want to hear just from the group of the five of you what's true about the health of your people in your sphere of influence.
I will start. I had 3 family members passed away because of COVID complications.
Three?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 3. And it could have been prevented. That's the saddest part, because of lack of information, lack of I wouldn't say explanation. Like they will tell you, here, take your medicine, go home, you'll be fine in 3 days. No, why I'm taking it, like how important it is, that people are really well informed. And both of my parents, like my mother, have heart issues. She was really, really bad when she had COVID. She was hospitalized. My father too at the same time. And right now she has it affected her, like breathing so much, like it's never gonna be back how it used to be.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So and myself, COVID made my asthma a lot more acute than what it used to be.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Then let's not talk about the economically aspects or emotional aspects. So I think we'll sick and tired of this COVID.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss, and thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, someone else?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, my dad's brother, which is my uncle, very close to the family. He was like a brother to me and many of my other siblings. Passed away, and he was one of the first ones. And it was just when it was just getting started, so it was even harder because, when my nephew dropped him off at the hospital, he was yelled at to stay behind, to not get in there, and they were extremely insensitive. And to get communications and updates when he was in there, it was nearly impossible. So it was a very traumatic experience, for all of us, including obviously even more so for his immediate family. So yeah, that was my experience through COVID. Most of the family had it ourselves. But not as harsh. Some of us we still have the long-term effects of sometimes not being able to taste the food or the sense of smell. But other than that, most of us are okay, besides my uncle.
Thank you for that, Bernie. Anyone else? Who's next?
So I'll just say real quick, so as mentioned already, there are a lot of long-term mental health issues. A lot of people are still dealing with anxiety and stress that, tripled or quadrupled, if they were already a worrier. trying to get back to normal. And I have a really good friend who's dealing with still now long-term COVID effects. One of the biggest things she said to me is that a lot of doctors think she's making it up with, some of her pains and some of her issues. They say there's nothing wrong with you, it's all in your head. And it might be, is what she says, but, I still need some guidance on how to get rid of it because I still feel the pain and I still have the symptoms. And she's kind of brushed off as, being told it's all in her head. And that's one of the biggest things that she has found frustrating that she shared with me. So I think there's a lot of mental health issues that are lingering, which I would attribute to COVID, aside from the physical issues that she's dealing with, of course.
Sure. Thank you for that. Olivia?
My father-in-law passed away due to COVID, but he had a lot of health issues, diabetes, and he had a heart condition. And I could say that he didn't take the COVID very serious at the time and thought he was going to beat it. And my sister-in-law, because I'm from Racine, and my sister-in-law flew out to Oklahoma where my father-in-law and mother-in-law lived, which they both had COVID at the time. By the time she got there, she said she was driving them to the hospital, and my father-in-law coded. She pulled over, called an ambulance, and he pretty much was done. They couldn't resuscitate him, so he ended up passing away. And my mother-in-law pulled through. I mean, she had a hard time herself because she has MS and other conditions that, health issues. But my father-in-law, sadly, he did not make it. And it's kind of like, and he was an awesome guy, it's like so hard to believe that he's gone. But I did have another cousin. He was 48 years old, same situation, had some health issues. Because 48 years old, you think you're not that sick, waited till last minute and did not make it either.
Thank you for that. I am sad for your losses, and I just encourage you all that the ground is solid on the other side of it, and it is sad, and yeah. So I apologize. I'm sad for you. We're with you. I am looking at the time. I am so grateful for you all sharing your story, sharing the information that you've contributed during this time. I will certainly be in touch with the next steps of this, and please be in touch if you have any questions or of me. But time really flies when you're having fun, and so this was fun. This was good. It made a contribution, and so I can't say thank you enough. So with that, I'd like to end our formal time. If you all want to stay on a couple minutes afterwards, that's fine, but I want to stop the recording now.